So welcome to Inner Circle May the 7th. Hope you're all doing well. What I want to do before we start looking at the case study is just do a round introduction so everybody knows who everybody is. So should we start? Ian, you are in the top left-hand corner, so we'll start with you.
Hi everybody, I think I know quite a few of you by now. My name is Ian Brayshaw. My company is, as says on the banner, iBray Limited. But I also have a franchise with ProActions, and I'm there to support businesses in the variety of ways, project management, helping them with their strategic viewpoints, and I'm also GDPR qualified, so data protection also in that mix. Been an interesting time. Gained some new clients over the last couple of weeks, which is absolutely excellent. At the moment, it's helping people out pro bono where I can, and then hopefully, if they like what they see, then they'll become full clients after lockdown ends.
Ian, quick question, just for my interest. Any specific GDPR challenges at the current time with everybody's working electronically?
Well, people who are, shall I say it, tech savvy have too many, because it mostly revolves around how you access your work files when you're working from home, and what protection you use, and no sniggers please, because depending on what antivirus software you have, things for you. I have McAfee, and I had a panic day before yesterday because something that tried to attack my laptop, it took offense to, and it wiped out all of my cookies. So very good, but it was unexpected for me to have to go back and log on to everything from scratch. Okay. So yeah, there's some very, very easy things, you know, and if you're working in still working in a shared space like a shared occupancy home, and you're looking at anything sensitive, make sure you use a privacy screen.
Okay, right, thank you. Janet, tell us a bit about you.
Hi everybody. So Janet Smythe, working as an accountant, mainly small businesses and self-employed people. It's been a real roller coaster for us, I think, the last 2 months. Just really, it seems to be every week something new comes through which we've got to try and deliver and give advice on. So that's been a real challenge for us. I think this week it's been all these, the loan sort of system, getting people on board with them, making sure they're getting full access and able to utilise them to the best. Previous to that, it was all the furloughs. So yeah, literally every week, and government's not particularly helping us in as far as with the furlough scheme. It was all down to us as the accountants to organise and make the application. With the self-employed scheme, it's literally they've got to do it themselves, and we're actually tied on that. So, and some of our sort of self-employed people are really not comfortable with doing that, and that's going to be a real sort of a challenge for us to try and make sure they've got access to that if they've not previously had to do anything like that themselves. So, so that's where I am. Yeah.
Two questions then. Number one, in terms of the business loan application process, the bounce back loan, has that been an easy process for most of your clients? And then number two, when are you taking a week off? Because it sounds like
We'll come back to number two, yeah. Well, yeah, the bounce back loan was amazing. To be fair, I applied for it on Tuesday and it came through this morning. And it was literally a 5-minute application. Yeah. Very limited information required. Literally, your turnover for 2019. Are you still a viable business? Did you suffer an impact from the current situation? And that's about it, really. So yeah. That was Santander.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you've got a year's no payments, and then 2.5% for the next 6 years. So amazing.
Yeah, no, I'm sure we're going to be talking about it today, but that seems to me a bit of a no-brainer at the minute. I mean, interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got clients with loans at the moment at 20%.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you access that and pay that loan off?
True.
So yeah, it's a great deal.
Rob, you're next on my list. Help us understand a little bit about you, mate.
Yeah, no problem, mate. Well, as it says on the screen, I'm a will writer stroke estate planner. So it's pretty much self-explanatory. Do wills, lasting powers of attorney, personal trust planning. Get involved a little bit in probate, more on the advice side than actually charging people to go through it. Like everybody else, it's been a challenge. I based a business when I started it over 20 years ago, purely on face-to-face, sitting in people's living rooms. That's sort of not really possible anymore. So like everybody else, I'm doing Zoom calls and WhatsApp calls. The big challenge for me in wills and powers of attorney correctly witnessed so that they're actually legal. For that, I am classed as a key worker, so I can actually take the documents out and get them signed. But what it's meaning is, like last week as an example, I drove all the way to Norwich just to pick up 2 signatures to drive all the way back to make sure the will was legal. But that's where we are at the moment. So none of my business is Family First Consultants. And that's me in a nutshell, really.
Yeah, and how are you practicing social distancing, but making sure the wills get signed appropriately?
Well, my sales kit's changed a little bit. I've now got rubber gloves, a folding table, and a face mask, where I used to carry a briefcase. It basically follows the same format, which is I will give the will to the testators to sign. I usually post it through their letterbox for them. They then go to the nearest window so that I can see them. They read it. If they're happy, they sign it. They come back to the front door. They post it back to me. I witness their signature, and then it's legally binding. I usually take someone with me to act as a second witness, which is usually my wife, so that doesn't cause too many problems. And it's pretty much covered from there.
Yeah, how did you feel about being dragged to Norwich, though?
She loved it.
Day out.
It was a day out. The only thing is we couldn't stop for anything to eat, so that was a main problem.
Great, thanks, Rob. Toby, can you tell us a little bit about you, mate?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, Toby Acton, personal business mentor and trainer. So basically what I do is I help business owners become wealthy faster. I'm all about helping people get from where they are to where they want to be in the fastest possible time and really truncating that journey. The last few weeks have been interesting, been incredibly busy, which I love. My whole mantra has been about not just surviving through this, but growing and thriving. We're going to come out of this, and the ones that have put plans in place to grow and thrive, they're going to be hitting the ground running. The ones that have mothballed and taken some time off and sat in the garden, they're going to be a long way behind. And it's all about visibility. It's all about keeping yourself visible during this time, being on LinkedIn, being on networking calls, being on things like this, and also being causative. Not, oh, woe is me, this has happened to me, but let's see what we can make happen. And looking for the opportunities. So many opportunities out there. I'm really excited at the moment. Change always brings opportunity, and opportunity brings money.
Yeah, it's an interesting one as well, because I was talking, I've started doing on a Thursday, I've started doing a live show on Facebook called Cervello Live, where we talk about all issues money. And one of the things that came out in one of our trade magazines last week was that 25% of customers haven't heard from their financial planner, which is mad. For me, the time to help people is the time when they need it the most, right? So certainly. What Toby, just out of interest, what sort of challenges a businesses you're working with facing at the minute that you're supporting them with?
Obviously, a lot of them have reduced income.
Yeah.
Their clients, even if they've got clients on retainer contracts, those clients just aren't able to to one of those contracts. They just haven't got the money coming in. So often it's a case of, you know, making allowances, making concessions. I had one client, she was telling us this morning that she wasn't getting money in from somebody, so she offered them that she just sent out another invoice with a discount, and the invoice was paid straight away. And just making those concessions to everybody's facing trouble at the moment. But the main thing is keeping the focus on the future. Because, like I say, we're going to come out of this. Interesting, the scenario that the Bank of England put forward this morning. I don't know if anyone's seen it, where they're saying, look, we're going to, their figures are looking at a 14% drop in GDP this year, but they're looking at a 15% increase next year.
Yeah.
So they're not looking at any serious scarring of the economy over time. So yeah, it's tough at the moment. It's going to be tough, but it's not going to last forever.
Yeah, I'm guilty. The guys, the Cassie and Charlotte in particular, have started this thing called Chris Dames Bingo in my house, where every time I repeat something, they just have a little tally. And apparently, I'm using the phrase "this too shall pass" a lot of the minute, but it will. We know it will. Yeah. We need to make sure.
The one that's getting on my nerves is the new normal.
Yeah. I haven't used that one, thankfully. Simon, help us understand a little bit about you.
Right, do you want me to include the new normal, and do you need to talk about how things will go?
Out, and we'll do it.
Sorry, I had to say that. Good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, it says on the bottom there who I am, Simon Lewin. I work for a great organisation called East London Business Place, and we offer free business support to businesses across the London area. Week 7 in the Lewin household. Each week has been very different. People are looking for different types of support, but I would say the common thing is it's not all about business. It's sometimes a person to talk to who's not in their household. Yeah. It's about mental well-being. It's bouncing ideas across to somebody. It's great about the bounce back scheme, the self-employment income support scheme that's going to be officially released next week, even though you can look at it now. But what do you do with that money? What's the direction of your business? And I think the exciting thing is there are some businesses who we have been working, have done a complete change around from where they were 2 months ago, and are actually producing things that are PPE related or providing a service through courier systems so that they can maintain some sort of normality in relation to that. People now are getting somewhat irritable in terms of will he or won't he on Sunday. But whatever's going to happen, we're not going to be going back to work, I don't think,
immediately
on Monday morning as though everything's normal. So there's going to be that phase process back, and people have to work on the basis of that and making sure that they're safe, their staff are safe. So we're also doing series of workshops to the people who are on the programme, or webinars, as I should be calling them now, to try and engage people to make sure that they're doing the right thing and not getting information overload. Personally, I've been involved, or will be involved, because I'm running 2 now, specifically for 2 boroughs, one specifically in Waltham Forest. So Waltham Forest businesses can attend that, and the other one is a Havering focused business workshop that's taking place on the 19th of May. But yeah, that's it. That's where we're at, really.
I'm glad you didn't use the word pivot, because that's the most...
Oh, that's my 3rd one down, actually.
But give us an example, Simon, just very quickly, of a business that has changed focus and how they've done it.
Right. Well, I'll give you 2 examples. One as an extreme thing where 2 months ago, the guy was doing clothing and looking at setting his own production abroad in terms of clothing. He's now doing PPE stuff. So he's actually distributing across the UK. He's also been able to secure some stuff in America. And there's actually, funnily this morning, the challenge is the things that relate to providing that service. It's not just, here they are, this is the price, that's it, away you go. It's actually going through the relevant red tape in order to make it happen. But it has become a little bit easier in terms of being on an NHS framework. And that's another thing that we're working with businesses on, is tenders. An email that's come through about a tender for a catering provider to provide sandwiches. And you think to yourself, in these times, why would people be tendering? So activities are still going on, and that's what we're helping with. And the last one, really good news story, is a guy who's got a bike shop. He in terms of a booking a session to either collect a new bike, get your bike serviced, and it's working extremely well with him. A lot of businesses now, as we move towards going back to work in some form or other, people will be resistant to use. So he's capitalising on that. There are incentive schemes where your employer will help you pay for the bike, free loan, as it were, for that. And there's some initiatives there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really some positive stuff out there.
Cool, good stuff. Thanks, Simon. Hilary, tell us a bit about you. Oh, can you do me a favour? Can you just unmute your, or rather, can hear you now.
Hilary Rowland, co-founder of Next Chapter Retreats. Peter, sorry that he couldn't make it this afternoon. We work with people who are at various transition points in their lives, both people and businesses. So we enable them to take some time out, think about what they want to do, and, as we say, enable them to write their next chapter. Most of our business was running retreats, which obviously are events, taking people away to somewhere nice, and they're just giving them some time to think. So we haven't been able to do that. We are in the process of putting as much as we can online and designing some 15-minute, what we call retreats, which are on the title, How Are You Really? So it's very much about giving people the chance to think about themselves, knowing that actually at a time like this, people go through a whole range of emotions. We ourselves do and have. And, you know, at times we feel, yeah, okay, I can manage this. Other times, actually, if you're anything like me, I get very despondent, very discouraged, or, you know, exhausted. And these 15 minutes are just designed to be just reflections, really. So get people away from their work, just to think about themselves. How are they coping? And to give them some questions to think about, and some resources that they can draw on.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Hilary, because I don't think you're going to be alone in terms of experiencing that roller coaster of emotion.
No, exactly.
Certainly that's...
And I think it's only going to get worse, because at the moment, all the news is about the pandemic. As soon as people realise what it means for the furlough scheme to be withdrawn, I think that's going to be another great shock that is going to hit a lot of people. We also run a CEO group of SMEs, and they were saying, yeah, we're moving from here into making people redundant, and saying that a lot of their staff have absolutely no idea, and just think that somehow, you know, more money is going to fall off the magic money tree, if not from the government, then from their employer. So I think we're about to hit another phase of shock, and with that anxiety, because it's getting people personally.
Yeah, no, it's going to be there's going to be some strange times coming up, I think. Just out of interest, how do you, because you're used to giving people mental space outside of their normal situations to think about what their future looks like. How do you do that in a virtual environment?
Well, obviously we still do one-to-one coaching, and we can, you can do that pretty easily on Zoom. But we're going to design something that just has a sort of series of images, some slides, some music, some reflective questions, just to kind of engage people, their attention for say 15 minutes. And then what we're going to do, that will be free. After that, we're going to provide webinars. So if people want to take any of those topics further, and want some help, want to engage with us, we will provide those on a subscription basis.
Great, thank you, Hilary. Appreciate that. Kevin,
Okay.
a little bit about you. Kevin, can you just unmute yourself, mate? Thank you.
I do apologise. Can you hear me now?
And yeah.
Good afternoon, ladies and gents. We're a later life lending specialist based in Upminster. So nice and local. Our main source at the moment is continuing to provide best advice, but best advice on a wait and see situation, unless it is more immediate, because most of our clients have to be 55 plus. The lenders have brought in various retention situations, etc. And a lot of it is talking, servicing existing clients as well as new ones, but really seeing if we can hold rather than go straight forward. Unless there is an immediate problem, then obviously then we're still advising.
Thanks, Kevin. Just one quick question, mate, on that. What might be an immediate challenge? Might it be that somebody needs their mortgage replacing with other lending? What might facilitate a more immediate need?
Okay, with the various lenders' holidays being taken, an advantage rate can take 3 months. Fortunately, the majority of mortgages are not now immediate unless they're in the court system, but that's still been delayed.
Yeah.
But the more immediate one is really care provision. We have a couple of people still needing to get care provision through. That's not immediate. Debt in general can be put aside for a while at the moment, but But a lot of meetings like yourselves over Zoom, we can't do it face to face, but we can provide it and good general advice and matter of coming back when the time's right for you and the client.
Amazing. Thanks, Kev. Appreciate that. Kim, tell us a bit about you.
Okay. Right. So Kim Lee, and as I've said, put on there, it's Morning Accountancy. I deal with quite a variety, really, from sole traders, small companies, charities, churches, and also a few sort of grant-funded social interest companies seem to come my way. It's interesting. I already work from a home office, which you can see behind me, so I'm used to working at home, but still the thought that you can't go out, you can't go and meet somebody face to face is definitely something that, you know, if I stop and it's not really much fun. I think that when it comes to people being in an office together working, I cannot see that happening for months. There'll be a few people can go in, but what we've shown is you can work from home. And because that's possible, the expectation will be that that will continue.
Yeah, okay. Kim, just out of interest, the charities and social organisations you work with, how have they coped with the current situation?
Yeah, well, there was one, for instance, that was struggling to get this local authority grant, but fortunately the government actually changed their guidance. But it did take a bit of persistence because, you know, they actually went twice to Havering and twice they got told no. But fortunately they have now got the £10,000, so hopefully not only will that help them because it was quite a small one, it's actually going to help quite a few of the people that use their charity.
Just one thing, I was talking with Janet on this yesterday. One other thing is that for businesses in shared workspaces and for other businesses that don't pay business rates, the government's given extra funding now to local authorities. I think Havering got another 2 million quid. What I'll do, Janet, did you get that link? Did you receive that link? Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll share it with everybody, because if there are business owner clients who may not have been entitled to the 10 grand, they may be entitled to this extra amount. So
I've definitely got one person I was speaking to yesterday that's in that boat, and I just sort of say to them that the local authority has got some discretionary grants. So
Havering in particular haven't issued any specific guidance on it yet. I think they're doing it on Monday, but I'll send everybody the link, because we've all got business owner clients, to the government.co.uk guidance on it, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. I just want to share just one thing that surprised me yesterday. I was talking to a potential new client, and they were saying they've been quite disappointed in their accountants that they hadn't contacted them at all, and they'd asked them a question some weeks ago and hadn't responded. So I had a quick look online, and when you went to their website, it popped up with saying that they were now closed due to COVID-19. An accountant closed.
Look, I agree with Toby on this one. I think the people who are going to go absent without leave at this situation, longer term, that's going to have a reputational risk to their business. They're mad, absolutely mad.
Definitely.
So yeah, 100% on that. Thanks, Kim. Really appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Pradip, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, everybody. Pradip Mistry here. I'm a later life planner. Unlike Chris does the financial aspect of later life planning. I do the life planning, the quality side of it. We're in a unique situation at the moment, because it's giving you a taste of what life is going to be like when you're not out there in the big wide world doing your usual things. So it's a new norm. I think this word is being bandied around, your new normality.
I've just hit out the bingo card.
And your rocking chair and pipe. But what this is giving is a flavor to people who have been sitting on the fence thinking about, what am I going to do in my life after I've stopped working or I've sold my business. And a lot of things are falling into place, and you're having to manage. And a lot of people are under a lot of undue stress, trying to figure out what to do. And it's having major impact on their mental and physical well-being. They're sliding into unhealthy habits for thinking, doing, and being. And I think this is coming up quite prominently. I'm speaking with, I do spend a lot of time to reach out just to say hello and how are you and how's things. And people are handling it in very different, weird and wonderful ways. Some of them are just sort of taken duck to water and planned out things and build up structure around them. Others don't have that structure that they used to have in their work environment or in life, because you're in a very confined space at the moment. So it's keeping me busy in terms of engaging with people who are thinking, well, when these things sort of slows down or changes into a new norm, what do they want to do? So it's giving me a lot of work to help them plan what they can potentially do, but starting from now to have the structure in place.
Yeah, I think structure is important at the minute, right? What tips are you sharing that helps people plan for that structure?
Certainly on a day-to-day basis, decide what you want to do throughout the day and try and stick to it as much as you can, but also be inventive and be open to things. Don't have a rigid structure. Do something that really gives you a
bit of flexibility, right? Yeah,
absolutely. Even if you just take a breather for 5 minutes and have a little run around, have a dance, or listen to something that you really can enjoy, and also sing. And I think that really takes out the stress out of you, and then it opens up all your senses and your pores. And I think that's a key thing to remember. Do something that really makes you happy.
I might have a little dance, but I'll wait till after in a circle if you don't mind. I mean, it's just
please, Chris. You can share.
Paul, tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, yeah. Hi everyone. It's Paul Rogers here from a business called Synergy Commercial Finance. I know a number of faces around the table, so to speak. Background is donkey's years with NatWest till I took redundancy in 2016, and now I work as a commercial finance broker. Two key differences are obviously I work for the client, I don't work for the lender anymore, and more importantly than that, I've got access to over 200 lenders. At the moment, income has dropped off a cliff from the point of view that anyone approaches me, I suggest they go back to their own bank to get some of this government funding, as if you can get it, it's the best and cheapest source of money potentially available. Unfortunately, the CBILS, the Corona Business Interruption Loan Scheme money hasn't been as easy to get out as I think the government intended at the outset. One of the keys was businesses had to prove they had a viable business as at 2019, and therefore it meant a lot of work for accountants, a lot of paper, and a lot of work for the banks as well. So it hasn't quite worked out as planned, unfortunately. But as Janet mentioned earlier, the Bounce Back Loan Scheme has been a phenomenal success in the few days it's already been out. Something I was seeing earlier, I think in excess of £3 billion has already gone out on that. And then, which Janet mentioned, they sanctioned over 15,000 cases on day one. Barclays were getting out money on day two. And I suppose for almost anyone, if it's the remit you want, it's a no-brainer to take it from the point of view. Potentially you can borrow up to 50 grand. If you decide to pay it back inside 12 months, there's no interest, there's no arrangement fees, there's no setup costs, you just give it back. But even after the first year, if you decide you actually want to keep the money, you will potentially never ever get any cheap as funds as those, 2.5% for an unsecured business loan. So as we start to move out of this, if you've got the money, you might want to think about, perhaps I need to expand, perhaps I need new kit. So if you've got the business bounce back, you're in a good position to move forward. So I would potentially encourage everyone to try and get it and sit on it. And then if later on you don't want it, Chris, pay it back without any money costs.
100%. Paul, on the market that you can support with, what's happening in terms of movements in that place? So clearly bounce back loans up to 50k, isn't it? Between 50 and millions, where are lenders sitting typically?
It would still be go to the C-bills, which is a Corona business interruption. If you don't want the 50, you need more than that. It'd be the government Corona, the C-bills. Failing that, obviously we've got lenders outside of it, Chris, that will look to help. But as you can appreciate, over the last few weeks, at one stage I was probably receiving 12, 15 emails a day from lenders, either pulling back from the market or revamping their policy and criteria. So there is lenders still out there, but it's a question of going back, understand it. In any case, it's all about understanding exactly what the client wants, Chris. Short term, long term, how much. And it's about getting behind and understanding the client's exact needs. Sometimes their needs aren't always as they think they are, if that makes sense. It's about finding the right product for them that's going to work.
Yeah, amazing.
So there is lenders out there, but it's understanding exactly what the client wants.
Lovely. Thanks for that, Paul. Dave, can we come to you? Dave Forsdyke, can you let us know a little bit about you, mate?
Yes, of course. Hi, Chris. Thank you very much for the invitation. This is the first time I've been to an inner circle. Very exciting. Those of you that may have spotted me drinking tea earlier, I just want to point out that I don't have a very tiny head. I just have a giant tea mug. I am the head of later life finance at Knight Frank Finance. I'm recognised in the equity release industry as a bit of a guru. Chris is going to smile at that word. We were joking about it earlier in the week about the use of the word guru, which is always dangerous. But yes, I've been working in equity release for some 15 odd years. Moved to Knight Frank last year, and I'm dealing with a lot of high net worth clients as a result. Current situation is a little bit tricky because there are restrictions being imposed by lenders on higher value properties, but we are talking with our clients and reassuring them. And I think once physical valuations, once the surveyors can go back and actually physically inspect property, I'm expecting us to be very busy. So I agree entirely with what Toby was saying earlier about keeping in touch with people, communicating, being proactive, just keep the conversations moving really, and it seems to be paying off.
Yeah, definitely. And when we spoke last week, again, we seem to, at the minute, we seem to be having to speak at least twice a week. When we spoke last week, you were talking about the fact that some valuations have a sort of minimum property value threshold. Well, where does that sit at the minute?
So if you're inside the M25, then the limit is, for most lenders, is £1 million. This is just in the lifetime mortgage world. Yeah. In the more conventional mortgage world, the limits are slightly different. But for lifetime mortgages, 1 million inside the M25, 750,000 outside of the M25. The only exception to that is the Legal and General, who, through their own L&G surveying arm, can value up to 2 million. But it all depends on the location and availability of their own surveyors.
Thanks, Dave. Really appreciate that. And I've got Cassie looking at me now. I'm definitely not allowed to use the word guru. All right, I've been told.
And
Tanya, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Tanya Dodo. I'm a family solicitor and I work for a firm called Edwards Duffy Shamash. So life has changed just a little bit. Everybody working from home. For me, it's not much of a change. I used to work from home and the firm's quite well placed because all the solicitors are set up to work from home remotely in any event. So it's working quite well. In terms of the legal system, courts are still operating. Obviously, no live hearings are taking place in the family courts. So at present, all hearings are taking place remotely, either by video link or by phone, which is interesting, as not all hearings are suitable for remote hearings. Court system's in a little bit of a mess at the moment. I find that I'm getting a call from the court a day before hearings listed, advising me that the hearing's been adjourned. Timings of hearings are changing at short notices, which poses many challenges. So yes, it's certainly an interesting time. In terms of my own work, I'm still relatively busy, surprisingly, with new inquiries, meetings are taking and Skype. So yeah, all in all, coping well.
So are you finding that people with a bit of extended pressure and focus on being a bit closer together, issues are coming up, Tanya? Would you reckon?
Absolutely. It's a bit like the period after Christmas when we're inundated with new inquiries.
Yeah.
I'm certainly busy at the moment.
And certainly the interesting thing is the work we're doing for existing clients who are going through the process, just with big pension and investment providers, everything's taking a bit longer. And it sounds like with the court system, that's happening too, right?
Absolutely. It was slow in any event, but it's even slower now. So that's the only frustrating
quick
thing.
And then marginally slower. It wouldn't be. but yeah. Okay. Thank you, Tanya. Appreciate that. Jacqueline, tell us a bit about you.
Hi, family. No, I don't try not to look at myself. Family business coach, working with small businesses that are family focused in terms of ownership, the leadership development, resolution strategies, how to balance different interests within the business and those reliant on the business, looking at the future direction.
Okay, amazing. And what challenges specifically do you think family businesses are going through at the minute?
With the family business, everybody's financial welfare depends on the business.
Yeah.
So if the business isn't earning money, they have problems.
Yeah.
So it's not just it's personal problems as well.
So it intensifies the issue, right?
Sorry?
It intensifies the challenge.
It does,
sometimes.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll be talking about the implications of a family business as the case study. So that's all good. Thanks, Jacqueline. Appreciate that. Sarah, tell us a bit about you.
Unmute. Hey, thanks for having me again. I really was looking forward to another one of these meetings. So my company is Sway Commerce. We are a one-stop shop business management consultancy. Now, a lot of people get confused, so I'm just going to explain as easily as I can, because business manager isn't a term that's really well known in this SME world. I come from a corporate background, so business management for me, it makes sense. So I complement coaches quite well. I'm not a business coach, I'm going to just put that out there, and I'm not a project manager. I complement business coaches because they work with a business owner to kind of get them working out where they want to get to, and then that leaves the business owner with a load of work generally. So I kind of act as a business manager and help them project manage to a point, but act as a business manager alongside that business owner, helping them get the right people in place to implement that work and the change that are going about. So that's one way that I work. I think the types of business owners that I work with are very much those that have read the E-Myth book. It's very much that operation-driven business owner that knows nothing about business management and quite often hasn't got any interest in it. So we kind of take a strategy view. Sway Commerce is, we are a one-stop shop. So I bring all the experts. And this is where I see the opportunity when I started the company. I saw so many business owners spending time trying to find the right experts to deliver what they want, quite often not knowing what they actually need or want. So I kind of come in from a strategy point of view and I kind of go, right, this is where you want to get to. You've already established that. This is how we're going to get there. And this is the program of works that we need to do. These are the experts you need. So that's where my skill comes in. I bring in the right people to implement that work that needs to be done. And I sit alongside the business owner as their business manager. So I hope that makes sense, because a lot of people get confused.
And I'd imagine that sort of people's like businesses, systems and processes are being tested at this current time, right?
Yeah, I've found that I've had business owners that are being challenged because actually they've got extremely busy and they can't manage that, or there's the opportunities there that they want to utilise, but because they're so busy they can't. And then obviously we've got the people that are struggling with cash flow and furloughing their staff. And then actually I've seen, and I've spoken to Toby about this just this morning, I've seen a surge of people looking for opportunities. They've taken this opportunity to realise that actually I'm not enjoying my 9-to-5 job. This is quite nice spending time with my family. I want more of this on the other side. What can I do? What can I create? What opportunity is there for me to use my skills or things that I'm interested in to create a new business? So I think we're going to see a surge of startups.
Yeah, you know what's really interesting? We've found that we've had new client approaches for people being a bit more reflective about what their future looks like. And certainly this is creating an opportunity to do that, hasn't it?
We've been forced to take a step back from the normality, and that's actually given us the opportunity to appreciate what we've got in our families and friends and lifestyle. And people are like, do you know what? And it isn't always about the money. Chris, you and I have spoken about it. It's not always about the money. It's about the lifestyle. Is there other opportunities for them to look at that might give them the lifestyle they want? So, and there's opportunity. Change brings opportunity, as Toby said.
True. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate that. Debbie, tell us a bit about you, mate.
Sorry, a bit delayed there. Well, I've got a very big head and a small mug, in case anyone's wondering. And my bingo word is narrative.
Yeah, I'm writing it down.
Which drives me potty. So I've been an IFA for over 30 years. I'm also a registered commercial broker. I do a lot of work with small to medium-sized businesses, owner-managed businesses. And one thing I bring to that table is obviously a network that I've grown over that period. And it's really great to meet you all today. Some of you I have met, and listening to the types of businesses you do, it's great that some of this is certainly complementary to what my clients will need. It's a real unusual time for all of us, but some clients I find are really coping quite well. People have said that there's opportunities and they're seeing them. Other clients are realising they're perhaps not as resilient as they thought they were. And for me, it's trying to find the kind of messaging and the timing to communicate, let people know I'm there, and almost let people come on to me. I mean, there's two sides of the business. There's the IFA work, which tends to be driven by a more coaching and mentoring style. That's what I've always done. And then on the commercial side, it's much more transactional initially, responding to a particular need. About 5 weeks ago, I totally wiped my whiteboard because I just couldn't work out what was real and what wasn't. And I've gradually been adding cases back in as I'm talking to clients and seeing whether there's any, there's somewhere that they can go. I think, Paul, you mentioned many of the lenders have got all their shields focused on debt management and the government schemes. So I have got stuff in the pipeline, but that's quite slow because lenders just haven't got the normal resources available. So it's a really mixed bag. For me personally, it's a really exciting time. Even dealing with some people that like to think of themselves as entrepreneurs, there's a couple of people I'm dealing with on new business ideas. This is creating a challenge for them as well, because in a sense, they'll never have much more time than they have now to work on their new thing. But even that brings a bit of a challenge because, I'm having to sort of help them along that process. They're not coping necessarily with all this newfound time, and it's a great time, I think, to be planning. Mixed bag. I think the case study looks really interesting, and I'm looking forward to hearing what people feedback on.
Yeah, Demi, the other thing, and I was talking to Gaz about this one as well, is certainly a lot of the work that we do is people are really good at what they do, but taking that strategic step back and linking their personal goals to their financial goals. They might be in their experts, but have never done that, right?
Yeah, personal, the level of business is like personal is critical. Owner managed businesses, you know, if someone's got problems in their personal life, that is bound to impact on the business.
Yeah.
So very much a tandem situation where, yes, I'm talking to them about their business, where they want to go, but I really need to get behind that and understand them as people. So one of the challenges is, yes, I can do a lot of good listening over Zoom. It's actually quite good for listening, but actually picking up the vibe of the customer, going to their home or their office, really beat that when it's a new client. Existing client, it's fine, then we already know each other.
Yeah.
But new clients, I still do like to go and see them in their, you know, natural habitat, as it were.
Yeah, thanks, Demi. Appreciate that. Charlie, help us understand a little bit about you.
Hi everyone, I do employee benefits for Cervello. We're dealing at the moment with a lot of queries around the coronavirus job retention scheme with employers. I think it's really exposed the complexities, I guess, of pensions and things like auto-enrollment and salary sacrifice. And I think where things have kind of been happily sort of trundling along as normal, it's disturbed a few issues for people. So that's been quite interesting. It's been quite interesting to see where people are. And I see a lot of opportunities really now for businesses to engage with their employees in new ways. Zoom and sort of working from home and all this kind of thing have alerted employers to the need to communicate to employees. I think more so in the mutual desire of the both parties wanting to see each other and wanting to know what's going on. So I think there are going to be some challenges ahead. Certainly agree with Hillary. I don't think we're at the, we're only in the first phase of this. I think, with all the World War II analogies that fly around, we're in the phony war, if you like, at the moment. And, I think businesses really need to start preparing for the next stage and what's going to happen. We are seeing, I hate to say, over the last week, I've seen a lot of businesses talking about what they can do in terms of putting employees that are on furlough on notice. And if the government goes ahead with a 60% drop or drop to 60%, then I could really see there being some major problems. So I think, organizations really need to start thinking about what they can do to help the employees that perhaps they're not going to be keeping on, and try and give them as much of a cushion and as much of a helping hand as they can before they have to let them go. I think that's quite important.
Charlie, I know you're quite close to a lot of our HR professionals, and I know you get involved in those networks. Normally we've got somebody on the HR on the line, but help us understand what sort of conversations are going on in the world of HR at the minute.
Well, I think so. I mean, it sort of goes there. I mean, one of the things that's really important to say, and I think other people have touched on this, is that there are businesses in very different situations, and there are some businesses that are doing well out of this. Obviously not by design, but by the situation they're in. I think there's been a big emphasis on mental well-being, because this is something that's impacting all of us in terms of our anxiety and our sort of sense of uncertainty. So that's been very important, and it's difficult. It is difficult trying to deliver that down a sort of computer or an email or So there's lots of that going on. I think that's important. I think it has really driven the well-being agenda up the sort of chain of importance for businesses. But for HR, the coronavirus job retention scheme came out very quickly, perhaps not quickly enough for some businesses. They've done an amazing job in some ways of navigating a lot of quite complex employment, taxation, and sort of various other laws.
but there are gaps in it. And it's very strange questions, I guess, that no one thought of that are coming up now, like statutory parental leave and how holiday will be calculated. I think one thing that outsiders and perhaps employees don't necessarily appreciate is that there was a lot of talk, of course, of businesses taking workers back on and also keeping workers on that they've already got. The difficulty with that is that the longer that people remain employed, they actually begin to build up greater employment rights, which is, of course, good in normal situations. But a lot of the reason employers have been a bit hesitant to go down this path is that, you know, that they're now on the hook for certain employment rights that perhaps they'd rather not be in a time when they might need to be letting people go. Yeah. So there's a lot going on. I think, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of people now really beginning to worry about what comes next. You know, what's going to come next in terms of bringing people back, and what's going to come next in terms of letting people go.
Cool, thank you, mate. Adrian, how are you, mate? You right? Tell us a bit about you.
Okay, so apologies for my late arrival.
All right.
So I'm a mindfulness trainer, training people in mindfulness, predominantly to support their well-being, but also I run programs on focus and communication. So at this time, obviously, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. I've been practicing and teaching mindfulness practicing for 11 years, teaching for 6 years, and seen this increase in the idea that mindfulness is just present moment awareness, and put your mind in the present moment and all will be well. And of course, there's some truth in that, but actually that's far easier said than done. So mindfulness is, yes, it is about bringing your mind in the present moment, but some people may be dealing with such high levels of stress and anxiety that actually they still need to be helped to navigate their minds through this time. You know, it can sometimes be that being quiet for 10-15 minutes can be quite overwhelming for some people. So at the moment I'm doing some 30-minute free online sessions to introduce people to mindfulness, and then other sessions they can drop into to support them. Really, I think sometimes this put your mind in the present moment and all be fine is just an oversimplification, and I think we need to appreciate what people are going through, and actually it's a natural response to be stressed at a time like this. So it's not about just trying to bury it with a short phrase. It's really about thinking, right, okay, I need to take some time out and really look after myself at this time.
And I know you're doing a bit of work with employers at the moment. How are employers helping their employees with coping with resilience in their mental health?
It's a mixed bag. I think some employers like to go down the head in the sand route and have a more old-fashioned view of, well, I pay you to do this job, and how you are at home or any other time's nothing to do with me, and perhaps not seeing that connection between well-being and performance.
Yeah, it's short-sighted though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I haven't done as much work online as I am presently, obviously. But I'm surprised actually. The sessions I'm leading, I led one yesterday with 15 people in the group, and it's really working quite well. People can connect. I try and avoid just typing into chat boxes and what have you, and ask people to ideally have their video on, but certainly be speaking into the group rather than just typing and reading. And yeah, there's even just on the first session of a 5-week course, we had quite a nice level of connection and communication. So yeah, I'm increasingly surprised by how much you can communicate with others through screens.
Amazing, good stuff. Vicky, Sarah, is Vicky going to come and say hello, or is she? Oh, hey, Vicky.
Sorry. Hello. Hello, everyone. So my name is Vicky, and I've just started work with Sarah. I've spent most of my career in the city, and about a year ago, maybe a bit longer, I joined a startup setting up a commercial bank for the cryptocurrency market participants. And I've been working on that as a business manager, and I've just joined Sarah to help her expand her business.
Amazing. And how are you finding it so far? That might be a bit of a sensitive question to ask. Don't feel free, you need to.
Yeah, so homeschooling is a challenge, and all that, and Sarah is in that challenge too. So yeah, she's a comfort as well as someone to work with. So yeah, it's been good so far.
Thank you for your honesty. That's really useful.
I know that I'm a challenge. Like I said like I'm going to be hard to manage. She knows that I'm a challenge, so it's fine.
Yeah, we've worked together lots in the past, so yeah.
Talking about the kids, but like whatever. Okay, so what I'm going to do is quickly share my screen and talk about the case study very quickly. I know you guys have already had it, but for the benefit of the individuals who are going to be watching this on LinkedIn, they wouldn't have seen it. So the inner circle for this month is Matt and his twin brother Luke. Matthew and Lucas, both age 62. Matt's unmarried, but Luke is married to Shirley, who's age 60. Matt and a mid-sized digital marketing and online advertising agency. Turnover last year was 520 with profits of 210. They've got 4 staff, 3 in the support team, and a commercial manager. And they've retained very little cash in the business. They pay themselves their salaries, but mainly they take dividends. And the reason that they've set the salary at this level is because they wanted to contribute the maximum into their pension. They've used profits from the business to buy premises, and the premises are mortgage-free and currently worth $450,000. They're worried about their business because currently people aren't, even though they're a digital marketing firm, their clients aren't running events because they're running events. But they are on annual retainers, which they're concerned about losing because their clients might be under a bit of financial pressure. Company got about 73,000 in their current account, 73,500. They've not furloughed any staff, but they may need to do it in the future, and they're wondering whether this is feasible or not. They're concerned about the mental health of their small team because everybody's working from home. Even though they reckon the commercial contracts they've got in place with their clients are quite robust, and their income will continue at the end of the year, they don't know whether that's going to be the reality or not. Matt, unbeknownst to Luke, Matt's in considerable personal debt. The debt's maintainable at the minute, but he's not paying much of the capital. He's got £800,000 property and £323,000 in his pensions, but very little personal savings. And then he's got a £550,000 interest-only mortgage and £67,000 in debt. Luke and Shirley want to travel. They've got a 28-year-old daughter, and Luke's built up about £452,000 in his pension, mortgage-free and worth about $950, and about $95,000 held in cash. Shirley has been ill recently, but had a career as a teacher and has got a teacher's pension. And they reckon they need about £80,000 a year to sustain their income. This is Luke and Shirley when they stop work. What's important to Luke? Luke wants to help understand a little bit about the value of his business so that he can have a conversation with his brother about potentially buying him out. However, he's concerned about the future of the business based on the current situation. Worried about potential lockdown, as essentially using his property assets to unlock capital and wants to understand a bit more about this. And currently having a lot of concerns and finding it difficult to maintain his focus and composure and making really practical decisions. He wants to understand what he might be able to do to improve his focus back to normal levels. So that's where we are in terms of the case study. Who should we start with? I think we'll start with where we started off originally. Ian, what were your thoughts on the case study, and help us understand what questions you might ask, first of all?
Questions I might ask. Okay, so I think the questions I would ask are, in this particular situation, where were their thoughts about what kind of profit margin they want for the business, because that's something that's going to help drive things as they get further into working out what they do next and also what they do in the future. Want to know more about this idea about using property assets to unlock capital, whether he just means his personal property or whether he means the property that the company owns. Want to ask him why he hasn't used furlough yet, with all of the worries that he's got. And then what they're doing to manage their thoughts on how long their cash will last, and also another topical thing, but how much are they talking to their existing clients and managing their expectations and getting what their expectations are of what they can do.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Janet, thoughts? Oh,
there we go. Right. Yeah, there was quite a lot of different things to sort of consider, really. So I'll just pick out a couple that particularly. In particular, I suppose something we've come up to before has been the pension contributions that have to be the same as the net salaries, and we've talked about that before, and that's not the case. It's your value to the business, and so the set salary is not relevant in this situation.
So, I always chuck something like that in, Janet, but you're right. So we have talked about this before, and the reality on pension contributions is if you're a director of a limited company, you don't need to pay yourself a salary to validate that level. For employees, it's 100% of salary, but for directors of limited companies, as long as you're making an employer contribution, unlimited amount.
Yeah. So that was the one thing I would say, though, whereas it used to be the case where it was a large dividend, small salary for directors, it's not quite so much the situation now, because the dividend situation is not so attractive. So you can take the salary and actually get tax relief on it through the company, and then it can weigh itself up, particularly if the directory is not paying national insurance, maybe because he's of an age where he's not paying national insurance. So I think it becomes a situation later on where you need to weigh that up.
Yeah.
So that was my first thoughts. Talked about one of the directors coming out of the company, and I think that thing we need to look at the value of that company at that stage. And there's lots of things to consider there, looking at it could be a multiplier on the turnover, it could be looking at the balance sheet, it could be the market value of the company. So I think there's lots of things to consider there if he was looking to come out and be bought out of that company. But one thing I would say, I don't think it's the right time now to be doing a valuation on the company. So I think that's, maybe it's something for another year or so's time.
Yeah.
So that was my thoughts on that. I think, like as previously said, definitely consider furloughing the employees and maybe utilise that time to train them and to make them more valuable as employees. So I think it would be could be seen as a positive rather than as a negative sort of situation for them employees.
Yeah. Okay.
And the situation with Craig, maybe bringing a share scheme in, a different class of shares to give him something, making part of the company more valued. So that's my thoughts on that. There was just one mention, excuse me, about the whether or not Shirley had full national insurance, state pension contributions. I mean, easy enough to find out on a personal tax account. So, really, that's really simple, straightforward to sort out. Entrepreneurs Relief, now being renamed Business Asset Disposal situation. And the only change there is that the limits come down from 10 million to 1 million. So I think he would still benefit from that, even in that situation. So I don't think it's something for him to worry about. It's just whether or not he decides to be to come out of the business and be bought out, which will trigger that.
Yeah, fine. Okay.
I think that's probably enough for me to sort of fill in on.
I've got some questions on some of that.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that. Rob, what were yours?
As you'd expect, Chris, mine's all around the happy subject of wills and stuff like that. Most of the rest of it, to be honest with you, went right over my head. But there's a couple of things that I'd like to address and questions I'd like to ask to both of them, really, just to try and get a much better understanding of what they're bringing into everything, what their partners have got, and how they want things distributed. So I'd like to try and find out, first of all, whether the business is owned 50-50 or whether there's a different percentage. I'd like to find out if they've got articles of association drawn up so that the shares are equalised and where they go should one of them pass away. As far as Matt's concerned, he's not married. It'd be useful to know if he's been married or if he's got any children from previous relationships. He's got a new partner, so I'd like to know whether they've got any plan to marry in the next 12 months or so, because obviously that would have an impact going forward. It'd also be useful to understand what assets or liabilities she brings with her, because again, there's a little bit of a red herring chucked in there about the prenup, which I'm going to leave Tanya to deal with, because she'll know far more about that than I do. But what little I do know about it is prenups work on separation or divorce, not on death. So it's not going to do too much to help the estate planning from my point of view. I'd like to know if Matt's got any other assets. There's no mention of any other property assets, but we don't know. That'd be useful to know. It'd be useful to know who his nominated beneficiary is for his pension pot. Yeah. It'd be interesting to know what his plans are when the interest-only mortgage finishes. Is he happy to stay where he is, in which case he's got to find a vehicle to pay the mortgage off, or is he happy to downsize, in which case he's got enough to be able to sell the property and move to another property? As far as Luke's concerned, he appears to be the better off of the two, but it doesn't give any information on what assets or liabilities Shirley might be bringing to the table. So I'd really like to know, other than her pension pot, I'd like to know what she brings to the table. I'd like to know if the joint house is owned solely by Luke or whether that's jointly owned. Again, that's got implications around inheritance or moving the estate forward. I'd also like to know if either of them have got wills or lasting powers of attorney. Obviously, lasting power of attorney implication for the business, and wills on both business and personal. I could go on for about another hour and a half, but I'll stop there and let someone else have a crack.
Cheers, Rob. No, that's brilliant, and I've got a bunch of questions for you as well that we'll dig a bit deeper in. Toby, what were your thoughts?
I won't repeat what's already been said, but one of the first questions that came to me is saying that they specialise in concert and theatre venues and acts, but what other clients do they have that aren't in that sector? Or is it purely that sector, and how are those clients affected? Yeah. Just needed a bit of clarification. I wasn't clear whether they were paying 28,000 or 40,000 into the pension pot. Seemed to be a bit of confusion on that. How much dividends have they taken over, say, the last 3 years? What's the average dividend? Need to know that. What are the average monthly outgoings of the business, salary bills, premises, overheads, that sort of thing. I always want to know about the ownership split. What have they done in terms of C-bill, bounce back loans? Is Matt willing for Luke to know his debt situation? I think that's quite a major factor. And how's the debt built up? Is he living outside his means? Has he got a gambling problem? Is the debt growing? What's his credit rating situation? And this was an interesting for me. Does he really want to keep working? Or is he just saying that he wants to keep working because he needs to keep working? How many years left on his interest-only mortgage? Again, as I think Rob said, is he willing to downsize? Craig, I think, is interesting. What's Craig's mindset in terms of the business? Does he share their values and their ethos? Does he feel part of the business? Would he want to have a financial interest in the business? And Rachel, Luke's daughter, has she got any interest in the business at all? She's mentioned in passing, she's working for Google, but could there be something there that she may be interested to get involved? Yeah. Luke and Shirley, main thing, do they have health care cover? Because I know from my mother and father-in-law that those costs can go up and up and up, and the premiums can get massively high. My mother and father-in-law, by the time I stopped them paying it, they were paying £2,000 a month in healthcare premiums. And it was just going to wipe them out. So, are they self-insured? Can they go self-insured? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Unlocking the asset value, are they looking at commercial mortgage or a sale and lease back deal, something like that?
Cool. Thanks, Toby. We'll come back and do questions in a minute once we've gone round to everybody. Hilary, what were your thoughts?
The person in all of this who interested me was Luke, because there are a couple of things that made me think that Luke is not at all sure about what he wants to do next. So it says, he wants to consider his future, wants to travel extensively, wants to buy his brother out. It's all, and, he's got a lot of concerns, not able to focus. It says to me that actually he's not at all sure about what he wants to do. And my question would also be, what would Luke do if he bought Matt out? Would he still go traveling, or would he give the management of the business to somebody else? Or would he let Matt carry on running the business? And is Matt a safe pair of hands, given his financial situation and all his debts? So I guess, I focus much more on some kind of the personal, the interpersonal things here. And it seems to me that Luke needs to do, some quite sort of careful thinking about what he really wants.
Yeah, okay. That's great. Thank you. Okay, yeah, loads of questions on that as well. I'll come back to that. By the way, in every case study I write, I do like to chuck in, normally it's from the 80s, a bit of a pop culture reference. If you do get it, feel free to mention it, because there is bonus points, not that there's any prize. Kevin, tell us a little bit about what you'd have a conversation about the brothers with.
Okay, Chris, on the basis of we've had the background there, I think the first thing here you've got to look at is a very COVID-19 scenario. They need to sit down and really talk to each other to see how in the next 3 to 5 years we're playing, first of all, and probably be honest. Luke, gentleman of all options, his brother Matthew's obviously debt-ridden and in a very awkward situation. So this is a classic situation where somebody like my still last 21 years in equity release and later life lending would work alongside an IFA and would, once they've had a straightforward conversation, say, okay, these are different options, where you're planning. So I'm really looking at just the two of them rather than the whole company scenario, because if they're in entertainment at the moment, it ain't a good place to be in. So my advice would be different types of lending they can do via working with partners, one myself, one being specialist. So that's more of a whole situation. But like any case study, I think you've done very detailed and very good. And it is where we could be looking in 6 to 12 months going forward. People got to look at options, the debt, the niceties, whatever, and you've got the two extremes.
Yeah, I agree with you. It starts with what are you planning to do with the next 3 to 5 years before jumping in, right? That's where it starts. Thanks. So I've got a couple of questions for you, Kev. Kim, tell us a bit about your thoughts on the case study.
Well, I'm not going to repeat everything you said. So and also interestingly, Toby, you mentioned a few things that occurred to me. That pension contribution, are they paying it or is the company paying it? That's not clear. Why they're sort of 28,000 and then their salaries at 40 with that confusion that we've obviously cleared up already. So interesting on that. The just on the teacher's pension, It's actually really a good pension to have because it's a final salary pension. And I was having a little look at it earlier. Did I make a note? Because there's actually a calculator that you can use to see what you get out of it. So actually could go quite a long way, because potentially, say she'd had a £40,000 salary, she could get out a lump sum of nearly £67,000 and still have £10,000 odd a year out of that. So that would go towards that and estate pensions and the other bits. Or she could take less out and, you know, and have a higher salary. So that's a good pension. The things she brought up as why is it a good pension to have. Yeah, we've already talked about entrepreneurs relief and the advantages there. But yeah, you know, there's some other information you would want on the actual expenses of the company to really have a view on it. And as Janet's already said about, actually, if they're going to look at Luke coming out of the company, how would you maybe value his interest? And it's very difficult with small family companies, especially where they are a lot of else. So yeah, interested to hear what people have got to say.
Cool. Kim, just one thing on that teacher's pension as well, you didn't mention, it is super valuable, and definitely it would fill part of their gap in terms of the income need. The bit that's really important to mention is it's in pre and post retirement. So that 10 grand would not only be 10 grand, that would be guaranteed to increase every year. So you'd have to, Sophie wanted to pop in and say hello. The benefit of it isn't only the income, it's that really valuable increase as well. Thank you. Friday, let us know where you are with this, mate.
Hello, Chris.
Hi.
Thank you for the case study. It's a typical one. I wouldn't say typical because every client brings different things to the table. And what I'm interested in here is a typical age, which is something that's typical, is the age, you know, between 55 and 60 plus. And both Matthew and Luke are both about 62. So most people start thinking about, what have I been doing so far in my life, running business or working for somebody, and you've had all the trappings of your life and successes, and you think, well, what's the next step here? Now, particularly Luke, I'm interested in because he's already considering that he'd like to do something else. He's got other aspirations. And I think this is something that we all deserve to ask. What is it, the aspiration that we had in the past where we weren't able to fulfill, and how we can do that? Quite a few questions. Certainly Luke has got a lot of opportunities and challenges along the way moving ahead. But some question that I'd really like to ask him is, should he decide to part company with Matthew, how is he going to spend his time? Because, you know, he'll have been fully intense in the business, and that would have been, again, we talked about structure earlier, that he would have been functioning in that way. When he loses that structure, he'll have a lot of time in his hand. He has got aspirations to pursue things. So my questions would be, what are those aspirations and how would he like to achieve those? A couple of other things is, you know, his health. Is in reasonably good health? If so, how is he going to maintain that? So, something to mention there. But something that really struck me was something that Hillary pointed out as well, is that he's got concerns in finding it difficult to maintain focus. Now, if he was already functioning in a business environment, what is he going to be like in functioning when he's got a lot of time in his hand and he hasn't got structure? So it's really something to get his head around it. And I'd like to know what are the things that he can to manage? How has he been able to manage before, and how will he manage moving forward? So quite a few things there. And then again, should he leave the business, he'll be spending more time with Shirley. Now that's going to be like we're all doing now, 24/7 under the same roof with the other half. How are you going to manage that? You know, she'll have her own lifestyle. He's going to have to develop his own. And also they're going to have to find time to be together with each other. So yeah, and had any other interest before? Was he able to pursue it whilst he's still been running the business? So those kind of opportunities are there to ask questions again. So really, certainly I'd like to sit him down and talk through things and, you know, just sort of do a bit of soul searching and discover things that comes out of it.
The other interesting thing, and as you know, these case studies we don't share any confidential information on them, but they are based on experiences I've been having with clients as a financial planner and guiding them through their life. And the interesting thing is the amount that ill health in a family can inform what somebody wants in their future. And certainly because of Shirley's ill health in this situation, we've had clients who were all systems go towards this, like sort of this great ambition, and then health sidelines that a bit and they change their perspective. So it's interesting how that conversation sort of taps into that product. So thank you. Paul, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, hi there, Chris. I'll try and exclude everything that's been mentioned previously, but obviously both guys are in their early 60s and hopefully they've been working with you for a few years to work out both their future and business plans, really, because you know, do they both want to still keep the business running? I appreciate one is unmarried, so he might want to stay later. Company turnover 520, profits 210. So very crudely, the overhead to the business about 300 grand a year, so it's 25 grand a month, potentially excluding dividends. 73 grand in the bank account, so they might have 3 months' money already held there, which isn't a bad place compared to a lot of businesses at the moment. But as already alluded to, you've got to question why they haven't furloughed the staff, and potentially why isn't one of the directors furloughed as well, to keep the overheads down as much as they can in the present time. Own the property, freehold, unencumbered in a limited company name. Shame it's in the company name and not through their pensions, because that might have been really good for them later on in life. But depending on what the situation is moving forward, they might be able to borrow up to 80% of the value there, 360 at a good rate of interest. But of course, the question that then poses, Chris, is okay, you borrow 360 in the company name, how are you going to get out of the company? What's the tax implications going to be for them to take it back out of the company? So you need to consider that carefully. Certainly, Craig seems an interesting proposition. Could be a long-term positive for them. Some sort of staff shares scheme, incentive scheme as well, maybe linked to profitability and maybe future bonuses. I think Toby mentioned Rachel. That's an interesting possibility there, because maybe if she had a share in the business, she might come back to the UK and maybe she might take the company in a different direction, or maybe split directions for the company to give it another income stream as it moves forward and comes out of where we are at the moment. Luke and Shirley want 80 grand a year to live off when they retire. I might question what they do with 80 grand a year. Be nice to live off that in retirement. And yeah, there's lots that obviously Luke needs to look at around his situation. Nice unencumbered property there. Do they still need that? And you've got poor old Matt with his large credit card bill, which can be eradicated one way or another. It's just got to be what's cost effective and tax effective for him, really. Chris?
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. Okay. What are your thoughts on the case study?
Well, I think the first question I'd be asking is when will they be retiring? And if you don't get the 80s connection from that, I don't know when you will. So yeah, when will they be retiring?
I don't know. They can only answer that.
The case study talks about Luke wanting to know a bit more about potentially unlocking capital from his property asset at 60 years old, and the sort of finance that we get involved in is often based on the youngest age. So assuming he owns his property jointly with Shirley, it would be based on her age, which is 60, and at the moment they would get around about 33% of the value of their property under some form of equity release scheme. However, if they don't need it right now, then it's probably better for them to wait. The average age of our client is 75, and at that sort of age you're getting well over 40% of the value of the property, so it's worth waiting for as long as you can. The other thing, just to throw a slightly different angle on this, the other thing that I think is quite interesting for Matthew is that he may want to try and dig himself out of his debt by downsizing. He's in a property worth 800,000. He could downsize, take a couple of 100,000 out of the equity that he's got, and buy something much smaller, and that would relieve the pressure.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Appreciate that. Tanya, thoughts?
Yes, I've been focusing on that. He wants to have a prenuptial agreement put in place. The first thing that Matt needs to know is about the law surrounding prenuptial agreements. And the first thing is that prenuptial agreements are not actually legally binding. So there are circumstances of the case that the judge will take into account if they eventually split up and if she instigates financial proceedings. So that's the first thing he needs to know. Prenuptial agreements are quite complicated. They have to adhere to certain formalities to ensure that they'll be upheld in the event of a dispute. So he needs to know this. So they have to be factors. They have to be freely entered into. So both parties should be entering into the prenuptial agreement of their own free will, no undue pressure, no duress. So it's important that the prenuptial agreement is prepared well in advance of any wedding, so as to satisfy the court that they're not entering into the prenuptial agreement under pressure. They have to have had independent legal advice. Probably the most important factor is financial disclosure. They both have to be aware of the other's financial circumstances, and Matt may not be too happy about disclosing his debt to his partner. That's very important. Legal advice as well is absolutely important. They must both have independent legal advice in order for the prenuptial agreement to be upheld. So those are the factors that he'll really need to take into account. As long as the prenuptial agreement adheres to the formalities, there's a good chance that it will be upheld by the courts. So it's a good way of ring-fencing premarital assets, debts, and also protecting his business partner as well, because a business is an asset to be considered on a divorce. So that will ensure that there's no disruption to the business if his relationship does break down. But there's lots for him to think and take into account. Another factor is also there needs to be a review clause in the prenuptial agreement. If it's entered into, say, today and the relationship lasts for 20 years, obviously there would have been a change of circumstance. So it must be reviewed and updated if there is a change of circumstance, particularly if a child is born. So factors that he needs to take into account before entering into this.
Amazing. I've got, as always, when you speak questions, Cass is sitting there.
Just listening.
I'm always a bit like, these aren't personal, this is about a case study, but I'll come back to you on the question.
Okay, no problem.
What were your thoughts? Hi, Jacqueline. Are you? Oh. Perfect.
So, gosh, questions. They're co-preneurs, co-entrepreneurs. So what's the percentage ownership? Do they have a partnership agreement? If they follow themselves, what would that mean for their staff in terms of the management of the business? And will the weight fall on Craig? With Craig, he's got a key role, and he may be wondering if this company can sustain him. Is he looking elsewhere? Maybe he might be a good manager in terms of outside relationships, but is he good at leading staff? Is he entrepreneurial minded, really? With the support staff, what are their roles? What exactly do they do? Will their roles be needed in the future? What will furlough mean for staff? With the concern about the mental health, what signals have they seen so far? How often do they communicate with staff, with their team? This idea of tying Craig in, how long has that been an idea? And what are the long-term implications of that? So the cost to them, benefits to them and him. Does he want to potentially join or become owner of or part of ownership of a business that may be failing? I've got quite a lot of questions. Right, Luke is concerned about Matt's reaction to him possibly wanting to slow down. We're told that Matt has these debts. Does Luke know about them? How much does he know about his brother's financial affairs? That has implications. Luke may be worn out from the pressure of work, his wife's illness, and the change that we're going through now. So my questions are about what are his fears, what are his hopes. To both brothers, how important on a scale of 1 to 5 is honesty and openness?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Thank you. I've got loads come back, but we'll get through. Sarah, thoughts?
Hey, I've taken a little bit of a different approach, and I've got a lot of that, my line of thinking is in line with. So obviously these case studies you give me always get my brain churning in the what team I'd need to kind of help these guys. So I've looked at this from in 4 areas: a business management coaching perspective, the advice they'd need, the risks that are there, and the opportunities. So in the very, very first instance, I'd be looking at an alignment session. Matt and Luke are clearly in different places, wanting different things. So I'd be looking to work closely with a coach that can help them align. And does that mean an exit plan for one or both, or continued partnership going forward? And I think until you establish that, you can't really answer a lot of the other questions because they're not aligned. So that is the very first thing I'd be looking to do. Alongside that, I'd be looking to do the analysis work around the cash flow forecasting. There doesn't seem to be clarity of how long their money that they've got and the revenue they've got is going to last. So obviously, yes, make use of the schemes that are out there for them to access capital, but actually, where do they stand today? There doesn't seem to be clarity on that. So I'd be looking to get a financial analyst in there to really crunch those numbers. And then at that point, obviously, that would clarify how are they moving forward. There's lots of actually opportunities. Now, Craig I see as a risk. If he's the main person managing a majority of their clients, as Toby said, is he engaged? What is his plans? If he ups and leaves, how much of a risk is their current clients with Craig not in the picture and choosing to leave? So again, Toby mentioned about what opportunity is there, what outside of the clients they service in the entertainment industry, and can they expand on that service? So there's opportunities there. And then obviously there's lots of advice needed and there's experts in the room that can offer that advice. So you'd be the teams I'd be looking to bring in are, advanced, asked a lot of those questions. Yeah, so again, the risk, without knowing where they both want to go and how they want to take this forward and whether that's together or not together, it just creates risk around Luke and Matt and their different positions. So they're the first things I'd be looking to do. And I think somebody may be able to offer advice on this, but can you not release your pension for commercial property? So is there not an opportunity to move how that asset is owned? And is there a leasing opportunity on the property with other businesses? Or can they release some capital from it? So that kind of stands out to me. Yeah, that's me.
There is an opportunity to do that, but we'll give everybody a chance to...
Yeah, that's not my area of expertise, but I just know that I thought you could do that, so.
Yeah. Debbie, thoughts?
Hello. Yeah, this one is a really exciting, interesting case, but for me it's fraught with danger. I'd want to keep these brothers loving themselves, and I would want to make sure that whatever I'm doing and whatever questions I'm asking and my relationship with them is on a really good, open and trustworthy footing. The 2 brothers have built a successful business. I don't know how open and honest they've been. And for me, all the strategies that everyone's talked about are all valid. But without these two brothers reaching a compromise, then everything's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
And they're building on a house of sand. I'd want to look at whether there's an existing agreement in place that they once agreed or signed or wrote up, and just also have separate conversations with each person, make sure I'm the right person for the job, that they both trust me, and gradually bring them together when the time's right for a meeting when we can be open and transparent. But that may not be on the first meeting, because I don't know what each person knows and I don't know where they are. There is a minefield of emotion here. And even going in and asking questions early on will trigger them to maybe take up defensive or unaligned positions, which could start a cascade of problems for them.
100%.
I think there's some great solutions. There's income. There's potentially some good staff in the business. Why would a staff member come in if he can sense that there's this disparity between the brothers? That for me has got to be understood and fixed or compromised, or a rigid agreement struck that they're gonna, one or both of them's gonna walk away.
Interestingly, that might start with clarity of communication, right? Because
absolutely. I mean, I'd be boosting them. They've built a profitable business. Any danger of the business is as much around kind of what we're all going through as a society with what's happening. Clearly, there's some emotional stuff that's affecting both brothers. And when all's said and done, these two guys have got to get on and reach a compromise that they can still love each other and walk away with whatever it is they want, stay together. If that may ultimately mean that I help the brother that's got difficulties with the finance to say, look, there's maybe a transfer of some equity, release some money, help one of the brothers, or the other new member of staff comes in and creates some liquidity to help one of the brothers who cashes in a bit on their share so he can clear his debts. But that all needs a bit of work after we keep them on side with each other.
I suppose one of the other interesting things, and again, we get about this in the round robin, whether you decline to act for one brother because you was acting for another, and whether you'd...
It's interesting. I think there may come a point where that happens, but I think if you throw that in too early on, it's just going to get adversarial.
The service,
I would like to be taking it on as an advisor because I see it as a huge challenge. And emotionally, the language of communication to get that right so that these brothers stay on side with each other. And ultimately, yes, another person might be brought in to Chinese wall certain areas of where it goes.
There's certainly those initial conversations of coaching conversations, aren't they, to help people?
They're coaching, yeah, they're quite deep, and if we can come up with lots of things around ownership of the property, releasing it, leasing rent back, all that kind of thing, pensions. There's a lot of all valid solutions. But I think if the brothers fall out big time, then it's going to be potentially.
Charlie, what were your thoughts?
I think actually I'm going to start by talking about the relationship of the brothers. I think we were talking this morning about the importance of good leadership, and I think that in order for them to drive the business forward, to lead the employees, they need to be communicating and trusting each other a bit more. So that's going to be very important, I think, for them to get their relationship right before they can really manage the relationships of their employees. If they can't deal with the people closest to them, then they've got some communication issues that undoubtedly will be reflected in their the way that they communicate with employees as well. And onto that, I think they need to have a chat with Craig and really figure out what Craig's position is, what he wants. They're interested in tying him in, giving him some shares, but that might not be what Craig wants. I had a conversation with an employer a few months ago about looking to reward a member of staff that had been doing really well in their sales. he wasn't actually a sales member of a traditional salesperson. It just happened that he had done very well through the relationships he'd built as a technical person. And you know, I sort of said, sure about having the sort of cash incentives you're considering? And they said, oh, well, he did want to have some extra holiday and he did want some more flexibility to work at home. And I thought, you know, wouldn't that actually be a better approach, to actually listen to what he wants and see if you can work something out around that, than spend a lot of time trying to set up something brand new that might not actually be what he wants and might not really keep him? So I think it's important they have that conversation with Craig and find out what he wants. I mean, I certainly think in this period of uncertainty, particularly in the industry they're in, I don't think Craig's going to be massively looking to jump ship if he can avoid it, because we've already seen in situations with furloughing and various other initiatives at the moment that you could be very exposed. You know, there was a cut-off for who could be furloughed, and new employees who'd moved across in March might find that they weren't going to be covered by the furlough. And that has led, and I've seen this, and the first people, unfortunately it's true, the first people that will be out will be the last people to join, basically because they're the cheapest people, I'm afraid, to get rid of, and the easiest in some ways with other employment legislation. So I think, yeah, it's good to have a chat with Craig and with the other staff. I think, you know, there are some opportunities as a digital marketing and advertising agency for them to pivot and and to do something different. I mean, particularly, you know, the number of catering firms that are trying to deliver home groceries and things like that at the moment. You'd think they could use probably some of their contacts in the theatre and sort of event industry to put them in touch with some of those people to help them advertise what they're delivering. I think communication is going to be really important with those employees. They've talked about a concern about the well-being. Well, I think it starts at home. I think the two brothers need to look at their own well-being first, and get a good grip of their own sort of mental health and issues, because I think that will help them understand how to help their employees as well. I really do keep on coming back to this thing. You need to make sure that, you know, you're leading from the front, that the employer knows what the values of the organisation are, so that they can align them to the type of employees they want, and they can have that conversation. And if Craig does turn out to be just someone that, you know, always wants a bit more cash, always wants a bit more this, he's never going to stay, and he's probably not going to put his utmost into, you know, preserving their business. So they do need to make sure they've got the right values and the right people in their business.
I suppose the interesting point on that is, are the brothers' values aligned? I mean, they've built a decent business potentially based on their reputation, but do they agree? I don't know. Adrian, thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely communication for me before I say something on the mental health. But looking at their situation, if they did furlough Luke, he could have a few months seeing what it's like not to be working, which would give him a opportunity to dip his toe in the water there, and then perhaps Matt could take some more dividends to running the ship, and that would help his financial situation. So they need to have a good chat. And yes, regarding the staff, so the phrase, they're concerned about the mental health of their small team, particularly as everyone is currently working from home. Obviously, it's nice to hear that from employers, but again, you can't assume that employees aren't happy about that. They might be loving this opportunity to work in a different way. So before jumping, a lot of companies, you know, jump to this word mental health. It's a very, very wide spectrum between being, you know, very ill and needing professional help, and everyday stresses and strains that we all have and can learn to manage, and then feeling quite healthy. So yeah, have a chat with the team, see how they are coping. If they're not around the levels there, is it a question of bringing in a professional therapist, counsellor? Is it something lighter? And then in which case they could bring in someone like myself or some other coach to perhaps just do a session for the whole team online, which would be nice, you know, for them to get together and not necessarily be talking about business for an hour or so, and even just to do a little session and Q&A around how they're managing with their stress and anxiety, having work and family in the same space. So yeah, certainly before worrying about mental health, lots of conversations to have to really make sure any help they bring in is targeted.
Yeah, great. Simon, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the stuff that's been mentioned. What I'd like to know is how long the business has been running, and whether was it acquired as a going concern that was profitable and they've just invested, or whether they've built the business up. I think the relationship aspect is really important, and whether they actually work within the business on a day-to-day basis, or on the business, or just pop in and pop out as and when required. Within that dynamic, I think it's also important, as I've seen over the years, to be aware of the influences on their relationship. So does Shelley and her brother-in-law get on well? And is the new lady on the scene there for the right reasons? And would she influence the activity or what's required? And I've seen people change because of the dynamics of their partnership or their partners. I'm not, again, it would be important what the understanding is of each other and whether they truly know the depth and the desires, and also what the business structure actually is, in terms of what they have set up. So they got the job descriptions, all of those relevant things in place. They use outside providers in terms of HR. So if they are looking to come back into a working environment, what can they expect of their staff and how is that rolled out? Have they thought about repurposing the business in some way or other? And I think Charlie touched on that as well. And if that is the case, what do they need to do to make it happen? Do they need additional resources to make it happen? What is the skill set of what they've already got? Do they really know their staff that well? But also what the exit strategy is for both of them, short term, long term, and what Craig really wants out of it. Is there anything to protect the business? It was mentioned about that he could be a very volatile aspect to the business. Worst case scenario could be that he takes all of the information and sets up his own organisation. But what is the other bit besides the ticket sales that they're actually offering? So those are really the things I'd be looking at.
Amazing, thank you. And everything's been covered, so I don't need to add that much. But in terms of what I look at is just for the two brothers, what their life goals are going to be in the next 3, 5 and 10 years. And I'd look at focusing on how they'd want to spend their time. So I think the question that I'd ask would be, what does your ideal day, week, month, year look like in a year, in 3 to 5 years, to understand a bit more about how they spend their time. Now, based on the case study, I think that they'd probably have different aspirations as brothers, and I'd suggest that you probably want to get them in a room together in a safe environment to talk about what might like, because any strategy you'd have to have, I think, because they're so interconnected, would need to initially involve them both. So that's really good. One question I was going to ask Janet, and I'm going to leave the Zoom for literally a minute, but while you're talking about this, talk to me about business value and how potentially they might calculate it at a time when nobody knows what their business is going to look like in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, so business value is going to look at a number of items. So it's often what someone's going to pay for it is going to be its worth anyway. That's going to be the overriding issue. But we look at different types of businesses can be valued in different ways. So whereas an accountancy business would value itself based on the turnover and a multiple of that turnover, another type of business activity would be valued differently. So when someone asks me to look at a value of a business, I normally look at 3 things on it, and I look at the balance sheet value to give an overall what the liquidity of the company is and give a valuation on that. I look at the turnover and give a value on that, and then I give a market value as far as what someone's prepared to pay for it. So I would look at all them 3 things and then put that on the table, and that's our sort of starting factor. But unfortunately, there's no real hard and fast rule how you'd value a business. So it's very much, these are our starting points, and let's bring them all together and see what we come up with. But yeah, it's a tough one to do, and it literally is changes depending on who's buying, who's selling, what the market is. Yeah, but they're the 3 things I look at. I look at the liquidity, look at the turnover, and I look at the market.
How would you manage the fact that their turnover this year might be completely different to their turnover next year, and then it might go back up?
Yeah. I mean, when I look at a valuation for goodwill purposes, moving a sole trader to a limited company, you take an average of 3 years on that. So again, if there's been that real sort of fluctuation in a company, I'd do the same, do an average on 3 years, and sort of work on that, because it's not reasonable to look at 1 year if you've had a really good year or a really bad year. 1 year, so
all of us on the call are interested in helping people achieve their goals, and I think one of the recurring themes has been potentially there might be a conflict between what the 2 brothers are looking to achieve. How would you, and again, feel free to jump in if you've got an answer to this, how would you manage that from a practical level? How would you approach that?
Chris, Demi, I think both brothers have got to as well agree on the valuation formula. So that's their common property. Ignore the difference in debt and the difference, that's the business they've built together. And so having a common agreed valuation with, perhaps that's done by an independent valuer each year, and there's a program. It all comes back to what do they want, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and that will help inform them on the value, and they can have those annual review valuations done on the business on where they're going. That would probably be potentially an easy one to agree, because they both know the market, they both know the factors precedent within their industry. And the other thing is that things are going to change. Evaluation is only an indication. The formula is an agreed point for them.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you for that, mate. In terms of other input, the bit that I'm interested in is the element that where the brothers' personal goals might be different. And if you were going in as a business coach or a family business coach or any sort of coaching, how would you approach dealing with the fact that they might want different things? Ian?
I think that's a benefit, actually, that they might want to do different things.
Okay.
So I'm going to put a spanner in the works. There's an asset of property that the company has.
Yeah.
And the question I would ask them is, well, if you're worried about the digital business, don't you make some move to sell or cease trading as a property business, liquidate, reinvent yourselves as owners of office space to rent out office space? We've been talking about huge potential for new startups. Some of those new startups are going to want permanent office space, whether it's as a hot desk or an actual office. So there could be a viable proposition with someone looking after the property, and Luke could just sit there drawing his dividends off the back of it while Matt is there working away. It's a way in which them having the 2 separate desires works well.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Any other thoughts on that, Adrian?
Yeah, I'll come in a little bit from the left field, which is something in the programs I've delivered called mindful listening, where you give one person a certain amount of time to speak and everyone else isn't allowed to speak, essentially. And I would generally say with a couple of business people in their 60s that might be a bit odd and a little bit too different, if you like. But as these two are in marketing and advertising and their clients are theatre and concert, maybe they would be open to a bit of a different approach. So yeah, perhaps some techniques like that where you just really structure the communication to say, you know, look, come prepared and you're going to have 10 minutes just to talk about, you know, the business, your life, da-da-da-da-da. And it's interesting because when you've got that amount of time, people will generally drop into silence during it. And interestingly, then they feel, especially the Brits, we better fill that silence with something, and a lot can come out. So maybe, depending on what they're like, they might be open to something a little bit different, maybe.
Yeah, I don't, you know, it's an interesting one. I don't think giving the people time to talk and the opportunity to talk without interruptions that left field.
Yeah, hopefully not.
But I think sometimes you've got the challenge that you need to create that space, don't you, for people to do that.
Well, that's it. And business people, you know, they're thinkers, they're motivated. So very often when they're listening, they're half listening and actually gearing up what they want to say next. So a structure like that would stop that. And especially with them being twins as well, that whole family dynamic, you know, you've then got a rule to say that you're just a listener or a speaker, which is an interesting position to be in.
I'll tell you the other thing I'd be interested to know in terms of this case study, what their skills, what are they good at as individuals contribute to the business, because that might be part of filling the gap. Now, Tanya, I haven't come to you first because clearly I always get in trouble for doing that when we do the face-to-face meetings, but I did have a couple of questions. You talked about prenups not being legally enforceable, but taken into account by the court. What sort of weight are they given?
There you go. A lot of weight, as long as they follow certain formalities. People often come to me and they think that prenuptial agreements are straightforward documents. They're not. They're probably one of the most complicated documents I have to draft because they have to adhere to these formalities. As long as they adhere to the formalities I highlighted earlier, so as long as they've both had independent legal advice, there's been financial disclosure, no duress, there's a review clause, then it's likely to be upheld by the court, but it has to be drafted correctly. That's the important thing, and competently. Otherwise, it won't be worth the paper that it's written on.
Okay. So they're formal documents that are taken into account quite heavily by the court.
Yes.
Have you examples where they haven't, and if so, what mistakes do people make?
If they haven't been taken into if they're not taken into account, the court then just divides the assets in accordance with the way the court would normally deal with matrimonial assets under something called Section 25 of the Matrimonial Causes Act. So the court would just basically not take into account and take into account, they normally take the factors that they normally take into account, such as length of marriage, the parties' needs, contributions, etc.
Cool, thank you. Rob, just out of interest, how would you manage the power of attorneys in the business in terms of decision making? How would you make sure that the business could carry on running?
I'd need to speak to the brothers independently to see whether they actually do like each other in the first and foremost and trust each other. We're all assuming because they're twins, they're all loved up. They might not be. They might not. They might be forced into this situation through no choice of their own. They're lumbered with each other and they've got to get on with it. So I'd like to have a meeting with both of them first to see how they feel about each other, and also then involve Craig to see what his prospects are. Because ideally, the power of attorney would be each of the brothers appointing the other brother and Craig as their attorney for the business assets. As far as the personal assets, then Luke would probably want to appoint his wife. Matt, we don't know, because we don't know what state his personal relationship is in. We don't know how soon it is. Is there anybody else that could step in? So you could look at one lasting power of attorney for finance, but split into two: one for property, one for personal, and one for business.
Yeah. And you can the power of attorney from a financial perspective between the personal assets and the business assets.
Yeah, there's a section on page 6 or 7 that actually outlines someone's preferences. So what they can do, without going into too much sort of specific stuff, they can actually say that should they lose capacity, they wish their business assets to be managed by the brother and Craig, and their personal assets to be managed by Shirley if it's Luke, and A and other if it's Matt. So providing there's a distinction and providing there's a limited company. If it's sole trader, then they blend into each other. But in this case, they are clearly clearly limited companies.
In terms of the impact on borrowing, Kev, what's the situation in terms of paying off mortgages? This guy's got a mortgage. The pressure on paying off mortgages that are going to expire. So if he's got an interest-only mortgage and the lender says you need to pay it back, can people use equity release to release that?
Yes, they can, Chris. Unfortunately, Luke's percentage for his age would be too low to be able to pay his 550 off.
Yeah.
So in this particular case, what Luke would have to do and be sensible is look to downgrade, but then use equity release on the new property, so you can have a better standard of property rather than saying 250 from 800.
Yeah.
That'd be his way, where his brother would obviously have options that once his savings have come down, you could use a mortgage to top up the travelling fund, just obviously you won't get that money from pension.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, in terms of their cash flow, we ran their cash flow independently, and they wouldn't achieve the 80k, so we'd need to fund it from other places. So that's fair comment. Sarah, no, actually, Jacqueline, I couldn't see you on my screen for a minute. Thoughts on the complex relationship of family businesses and how you manage that? Because this is why sometimes family businesses are a little bit more difficult than other businesses. So how would you manage the dynamic?
So I've got twin sisters, and I learned from very early on you have to be very careful with how you manage them, because one twin is always going to be stronger than the other.
Okay.
And you have to be able to deal with the underlying resentments that might be there. So have to get them to agree on something common. And I'd go back to their values and why they went into this particular business. Start from there. So you're getting them on the same page where the values are concerned. I'd want to get them to agree to a number of things, such as agreements to be open to one another's ideas. A lot of times the dominant twin will overshadow the other one. So there has to be an agreement that space is going to be given to each other. And unlike the model that comes from Nancy Klein, which is about a time to think, which somebody alluded to earlier on, and actually slowing that down at the moment with the COVID thing, everything's changing very, very quickly. Needs for them to be able to slow down so they can think and give each other time to think. And there has to be an awareness of outside of the business, they've got another relationship going on, and need to understand how that relationship works. Also have to be aware that they will have conversations where you aren't present.
Yeah.
And for me, there needs to be an agreement for them to be honest and open, agree to be honest and open with me as that third pair of ears.
Yeah, cool.
And I think there has to be a session with them about disclosure, because we don't know what they really know about each other. So disclosure with each other, disclosure with me, as the foundation that's built on their values.
Amazing. We've overrun a bit because we had a bit at the start, but what I'm going to do is just sort of wrap up, and we'll start with Janet. In terms of, we've talked about the questions that you'd asked them. What advice specifically would you take as their next step, Janet?
I think taking on board a lot of things what people have said today, and certainly finding out what are their goals and which direction they want to go in. And once you've reached, and then you can start analysing the finances and putting them in place for them and making the decisions based on that. I think, you know, until you know what direction they definitely want to go in, I think, you know, then I can put together the finances to make them decisions and give them the scenarios based on that.
Yeah, so aspirations first, what do they want to achieve, and then look at everything else. Kevin,
yeah.
What action would you recommend they take?
Sorry, did he catch there, Chris?
Kevin, is he?
Here.
So what action would you recommend they take?
Right, I can hear you now. The action would purely be, like I said at the start, we've had all the different skills coming here. Direction, first of all, agree their first plans. Is there a solvent business? I like the idea where somebody said, could they go digital and use the building in other ways? Once you have that agreement, and if they've got to be open and honest with each other, what is the plan for the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah.
See, personal finance is always very difficult to talk across the two people, so you'd have to have separate meetings. And really the scenario would be very different types of advice being given to them, but then drawn back in together. I feel my situation would come in after the legal agreements, general finance, then we become in okay, these are the types of finance options we can do. Because you mature in ages, we're offering something different compared to the standard lenders, because as brokers independent, it depends on people's health, whether they want to pay interest payments from the beginning, whether they want to defer it, the flexibility. But the most important one is, once they take finance, if they take finance from us, they're not under the threat of repossession. So we've got a solve of pure flexibility going forward, which obviously would suit Luke, being that he likes high lifestyle and has no family to put onto.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. So what were your thoughts? What action would you recommend they take?
Sorry, Chris, who are you talking to?
It was you, Jacqueline.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I heard in, and I wasn't sure it was me. Action that they should take. It's all going to be around the honesty and the trust, just to make sure that that really is there. And I'd want to be really careful about that. They must have liked each other while they started this business together. They don't seem to have any friction, and I wouldn't want to bring friction in. So I'd want to be really careful about how I go in and talk with them. I'm going to go a different way and say I'd want them to be playful and imaginative, and to think about, in the ideal situation, what's their imagination, what's their ideal for themselves and for each other. And
I think looking at the possibilities of their future life is important, right? You know, being playful and thinking, like, you may have a perception of what your future life looks like, but let's try and break that and understand that it may not be this fixed thing.
Yeah. So I think playfulness is going to be very, I'll use the term playfulness, is going to be really important.
Yeah. I've decided that I'm going to have a massive game of run-outs when all this is over. So if you like playfulness, I'll make sure you get an invite. I couldn't believe Charlotte didn't know what run-outs was, so I need to do some education and make sure she knows what run-outs is. That's why we're having that giant game. Apologies, tangent. Demi, what action would you recommend the brothers take?
Right, yeah. Well, I've talked about the emotional side and keeping their relationship on a good footing, not bringing in any dynamite that's not, you know, in the room already. It sounds like they're getting on quite well, but that could change really quickly. I'd be splitting it down into areas that they can agree on as no-brainers and solid ground, that might be around things like the value of the business, how that's going to be valued, because they've already worked to that. So trying to split it down into things that we can get early consensus on, and then gradually leaving the things that may be more difficult. As Jacqueline says, maybe some of the things that they want to have fun with, they're not going to want to have fun around the business valuation, right? That's kind of stuff that's, so trying to just segment those bits out so that they feel that they're making progress and that it's not all bad news and it's not all we can't agree.
Yeah.
And then that comes part and part with how they then communicate to staff, potential buyers, how they look at maybe changing the shape of the business. It's quite a big ask to go from a communication business, which is a hands-on people business, to a property company, which is passive income. It's a slightly different mindset. So yes, a good idea, but I don't know yet whether they would be kind of up for that. Maybe one of them would think that's good and one of them wouldn't. We might be back in a bit of a situation. So yeah, very much splitting it up into 3 parts, perhaps, and dealing with what we can deal with, and then moving through the other 2 areas.
Charlie, what action would you recommend they take?
I think they need to figure out whether or not they're going to, again, I'm going to say pivot the business or furlough their employees. It's not clear.
Oh, sorry, I'm not muted. Hold on, I better mute.
No, carry on, Charlie.
Are you sure? I was going to let the guru speak. Anyway. Anyway, but I think it's not clear from the thing whether or not they've got any business, but I'm guessing they don't. And if they don't have business, then they can furlough those employees. And I think they probably need to make that decision sooner rather than later, because it looks like the government's going to start winding back that scheme fairly soon. So if they want to make use of it, they need to probably get it done in the next week or so. And in doing that, they need to have a structure in place on how they're going to look after their own and their employees' well-being. I think.
Yeah. Right. Thanks, Charlie. Adrian, what were your thoughts? What action would you recommend they take?
Yeah, they definitely need a meeting and to get talking, a bit of time to step back as well. I mean, the old maxim comes to mind, good comes from bad. And this isn't an ideal situation, but actually the company seems pretty healthy. Concerts, theatres, events will come back very well, I think, pretty better than pubs and restaurants in some ways in the long term. And so, yeah, to get furloughing people, to give them a bit of financial breathing space and then review things. They sound like that there are a time, personally, business-wise, age-wise, to really have this conversation anyway. And maybe this crisis has just prompted it. So,
I think the interesting thing is, like, they are in a time of transition at the minute, and it's important to start thinking about how they're going to take action based on this time of transition. So thank you, I really appreciate that. Toby, what action would you recommend they take?
A few areas. I won't cover the financial side of things because there's people on the call who are much more expert on that. But a couple of things that I picked up on. I think they need to talk to their clients, and I'm talking about the business growing and thriving throughout this. Their clients about what their plans are to survive through this. Yeah. They can then be aware of how their clients are thinking, and how their clients are intended to come out of this the other side, hitting the ground running, and how can they assist them with this. Again, visibility is key. How can they help them with that visibility? A digital marketing campaign. If they can make themselves indispensable to their clients now, those clients are much more likely to continue with the retainer afterwards. Yeah. And the individual acts, are they maintaining visibility? And also look for new opportunities. How married to the sector are they? Look at what other sectors are doing well. Some sectors are doing really well. Market yourself to those people. Yeah. So that was that. Then the other thing, which I don't think we've really focused, is one of the last things in the thing. For me, I'd sit down with Luke and find out what he really, really wants. and help him get absolute clarity about what he wants from his business. And then encourage him to work with that causative mindset, rather than being on the effect end of things, making things happen rather than waiting for things to happen. And, go database mining, go through all his contacts, past contacts, current clients. Where can he upsell? Where can he get referrals from? If he's spent, there's bound to be referrals out there. Very last thing, which Adrian touched on, is the employee mental health. And this is just something that one of my clients has done. They all call in, I think there's 7, 8 employees, and they all call in once a day for a biscuit. And they don't talk about business. And Adrian touched on this. It's just a chat. It's a biscuit break. It's the just chatting about things. And he actually, my client Match, actually sent out biscuits to all of his staff. So they got them in the post. Just a little something, but it shows that you care, shows that you're thinking about them. Then they do a social event once a week, which again, it's not business talk, it's just social. And then he's doing regular short one-to-one Zoom calls with his employees, talking about their home situation, so that he's aware of their home situation. Do they have kids? Are they looking after parents? What is it? What are their concerns? Are they coping? So again, they can see that he is genuinely caring about them.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. One of the points you raised is sometimes we get that our clients want to stay in touch, but we neglect the fact that we need to do that with our teams as well, right?
Yeah.
I think it's very cool. Yeah, I love it. Have a biscuit break. What action would you? Thanks, Toby. Rob, what action would you take?
Well, basically, my stuff would sit outside of everybody else's, really, because everybody else's is commercial and best for the business, best for the brothers. Mine's a bit more sort of nitty gritty, really. 3 meetings. I'd have 1 meeting with just the brothers there and possibly Craig to see what the business is going to look like and whether there is a need for power of attorney. I'd then have 2 completely different meetings, one with Matt and his partner to discuss what their needs are regarding wills and estate planning, what their future looks like. I'd have another meeting with Luke and Shirley around the same. Just to try and so what you'd probably end up with is the 2 wills, but obviously the brothers not knowing what the content of those wills are. 2 powers of attorney, 1 for each of them. One part of that, they would know that they're the attorney for the other if they're agreeing with that and if they're happy with Craig to be that. And the other one where their respective partners have power of attorney. And to say all of that, it wouldn't then matter what happens to the business in future. It doesn't matter what happens to them personally in the future. That would sit there as a bedrock for everything going forward. So that's what I would look at.
Let me unmute yourself. Really appreciate that. I've got the kids having a chat, so I'm just conscious that they didn't get involved. Sarah, what action would you recommend they take?
Well, obviously, I mentioned earlier about the first thing that's obvious to me is the alignment, but that isn't a quick win. That's going to take some time to sort of find out. For the bigger decisions, find out what page they're on and where they're going. So I think the quick wins for me is, and next time I don't want to go after Toby, thanks. Our lines are thinking are too similar, so let me go first. No, my quick win for me is this. It's kind of like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So they're in the entertainment industry and they've got the well-being of their staff at the forefront of their mind. And actually, can that entertainment industry use this opportunity to start offering things to not just their staff, but other people's staff, like in ways of, is there an opportunity there for them to capitalise on this unique situation? I'm desperate for a comedy night and, quiz nights. And obviously there's been some that have been going around and games nights, whatever, but, is there something that they can offer to the people that are stuck at home or these people that have got teams that are considering their well-being? So there's one opportunity there, but also tapping in as a quick win in their current client base. How can they advertise themselves? And they've obviously been in operation for a long time, their services elsewhere. There's definitely opportunities where they can get some more business in. So I think it's about sort of looking at those quick wins to relieve the stress they're under from
declining business, and then offering extra value for their clients in ways of using any opportunities that are there for them. Outside of this alignment and bigger decisions that are needed. Yeah.
Thank you. I need to get the positioning of the people right, Sarah, for the next one. So
or let me just sit in with him and then we can combine.
As long as you sit 2 meters apart, there's no problem.
Yeah, it's fine.
Ian, what were your thoughts?
Well, there's been so much covered already. So let's assume that Janet's done her good work with cash flow. HR people, Charlie, have done their good work with furlough. Our marketing guys have done the good work with the client management. That leaves people with an understanding of where they are now. So what they need is a set of milestones to know what they can do when they move forward in whatever path they choose to take. So it's going back to profit margins, break-even points, set them, monitor them. With a change of purpose, then of course there will be different taxes because of that change of purpose. Make sure that they perhaps use pension provision to minimise tax and stuff like that. And make sure that they make the use of all of the grants that's available to them and whatever funding they can that's from one of the government schemes. For Lucas in particular, it's then having a chat with him and say, do you want to be part of the management of this, or do you just want to sit there as a shareholder and reap dividends? The thing to point out to him, of course, is that if he just wants to sit there and reap dividends, then the possibility of him and his other half reaping 80 grand a year is relatively small. So, what other choices are they going to make, and how are they going to make it? And lastly, I think if there is a sale, and particularly if, as Janet said, if you're going for something multiples of turnover, make sure you've got everything written down as to how you do your business, because once the due diligence starts, when you go through the sale process, if people find holes in your process, they will beat down your multiplier calculation like you've not seen before. So they're the things that I would make sure that they do. Make sure that they get all of those sales, marketing, and other processes written down.
Systemisation of what they do is really important, right?
Absolutely key, particularly in a sale piece.
If they're going to be doing that. Thank you for that, Vicky. I'm conscious that because your monitor hasn't been on loads during the engagement process, do you want to pop on and say what action you take, what you thought of the case study?
I know she's listening in, but she's got the kids, so I think it's going to be a bit difficult for her.
Well, that's everybody who's currently on the call giving us their actions. Thank you to everybody for joining us again for Inner Circle. Really appreciate you jumping in. This will be going out, as long as everybody doesn't mind, and we'll get everybody's permission, going out on LinkedIn as a video, and we'll tag everybody into that. I always learn loads when I'm on one of those calls, so thanks for sharing so openly. And I don't know whether the next one will be online or face-to-face, but I'll make sure you all get an invite next time, and have a lovely bank holiday.
Cheers, Thank you, Chris. Thanks for the invite.
See you all.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.